And I am so pleased that Joy is going to share some ideas that she's developed. Joy started homeschooling just in the last few years, but she is an incredible researcher and also a processor. And I have been delighted to learn from her as well. And she's going to share how she keeps the goals in front of her children for their homeschool, as well as how she equips them with tools in case they meet challenges during the day. And I think this is a wonderful benefit of homeschool, that we can actually help our particular child with the challenges they meet. And they actually develop success at overcoming challenges, which stays with them their whole life. So I'm so pleased that Joy's going to share with us, and I'm just going to pass it on to you.
Thanks, Joyce, and thanks for inviting me to do this. And by the way, I do have a little printout with like a list of some of the tools that we use, Joyce. And so we can figure out some way of sharing it with people, but I just kind of have it in a Word document. I shared it with you just right before the meeting. So maybe we'll figure out after the meeting how to share it. But so yes, our kids are fourth grade, first grade, kindergarten, and then we also have a younger one who's 4 now. And a couple of our kids have special needs, which just make it, I think, for us even more important to have the goals that we lay out to each day, like kind of front and center. But I think it's very beneficial to any child and frankly, any parent as well. So somewhere along the line, we started this daily routine that we really do every single day. And we do it in the middle of our school day. So at the beginning of the day, we're actually in different places doing different things. Some people are doing math and reading, and we're kind of in a rotation. And that takes maybe an hour and a half or so. And then we all come together. And when we come together, that's when we talk about our goals. And so I start off each morning meeting is what we call it. And again, just to lay this out, our goals, of course, reflect our family's values. So I'm not saying that this should be everyone's goals. I'm just saying that this is what we do in our family. So I start out and I say, what's our number one goal of Gale? And Gale is what we call School Guided Adventures in Learning. So what's our number one goal of Gale? And then I'll let one of them respond. And our number one goal is to learn more about God's love for us. And so then I say, okay, and what does that inspire us to do for our number two goal? And our number two goal is to learn to love learning. Because the more we understand God's great love for us, the more we want to learn about Him and His creation, and the more we want to develop skills that allow us to share His love with others. So that is like our guiding framework for everything that we do in Gale. And so then we can go back to that when we hit a rough patch with handwriting or whatever. You know what? If we're able to learn to write this legibly, we're going to be able to write one day and share the words of Jesus' love with others, or, something along those lines. It just allows us to bring every activity back to those two primary goals. So we start off with the goals, and then I say, and how do we create an atmosphere in our home that allows us to meet those goals? And then we have like kind of 4 categories that they, will kind of say back. And so one of them will say, we want to have quiet, busy hands and an engaged mind. And so we have these like Gale approved activities that the kids can do with their hands. And I know this is more focused on younger kids. So sorry for, I know a lot of you guys have much older kids, but so they each have some things that they can do with their hands, and it might be a puzzle, or it might be playing with those kind of rubber things that you can just do all sorts of things with, or it might be just pencil and paper where they're using it to draw whatever they're hearing there, or putty, like we need a lot of work on fine motor skills, so we use a lot of things that work our fine motor skills. So anyway, things like that allow them to engage fully with their brain and whatever we're doing, but keeps their mouth quiet and their fingers quiet. so but we don't want their mouth to be quiet all the time. So that's kind of the second thing, is we say we want a respectful environment. And what does a respectful environment look like? And then we say we want to talk when it's time to talk, and listen when it's time to listen. And we want to stay in the room where the speaker is. So if I'm the one speaking, then they need to be in the room that I'm in. Because we often have people that just kind of, oh, I'm going to go downstairs and get this. And I know that there are plenty of moms out there who can like really roll with that. I am not one of them. I really struggle if there's a lot of activity in my periphery vision. So I need people in the room that I'm in. So that's, again, why I'm saying it reflects our family's values, but this is not necessarily work in every home. Yeah. So, yeah, stay in the room where the speaker is as part of having a respectful environment. And we want to make sure that our actions are contributing to other people being able to learn. So we want to make sure that whatever we're doing is not taking away from someone else's ability to learn. So that's all part of a respectful environment. And it's kind of our second category. And then we talk about an orderly environment, and we say it's easy to learn if we have our tools in front of us. So we need to put things away after we use them. So then it just allows us to glance around the room in that moment and say, oh, I think there's something on the table that might not help us today in Gale, let's put that away. And then at the end, we say the fourth thing that we want to do to create this atmosphere to allow us to meet our goals is to build strong will. And that means we are going to do the things that we need to do, regardless of if we want to do them. So we're going to build a strong will to overcome our want in order to do what we need to do regardless. And then we have these tools that allow us to build a strong will. And that's really what we spend kind of the bulk of our time on. So those other things that I was just going through, we kind of just go through them really quickly. And then for our tools, we actually spend time practicing our tools. So this is what I did the list for Joyce that we can share later in case it's helpful to anyone. But have any of you guys in your home, show of hands, had a time when a meltdown occurred and you just could not get past it to keep going? I mean, there's just somebody's pencil fell and done. Like we cannot deal with this anymore, Yes, we deal with that too in our home. And we also deal with a lot of, you know what? I don't want to do math right now, so I'm not going to do math right now. And so we have to have these tools to help us do the thing that we need to do. So I will ask them at the beginning of the day, or during that morning meeting time, I'll say, what kind of tools will help us build that strong will? So we have created a toolbox over time. And they will all just choose one that we have practiced, and then we'll actually practice it together. So it might be, I'm going to think of, if I say, what is going to help you do your history narration, even when you don't want to do it? And one of Miles loves this one. He says, I'm going to think about what comes next. And so he is thinking about the fact, well, after I finish writing my history narration or drawing my history narration, I get to go back to my puzzle. So, because we have back and forth subjects where one, we might be writing something and the next one we might not. And so he knows that he can go back and forth to his quiet, busy hands activity. So, and that's also another kid might say, and we have gymnastics today. And so that's where we also kind of talk about our schedule. Yes, today is going to look like this after we finish Gale. So it just gives them something to look forward to, after Gale. So that would be one tool that we practice. And so they each choose one and we practice it. And then I'll actually say, what are you going to use today? What is your tool going to be? And then they'll say whatever it is. So then for the rest of the day, if something comes up, we can all use that tool together to help whoever is having trouble. Because I think what happens, or what can happen easily in our house, is people will feel singled out, you are not doing what you're supposed to do, and whatever. But if we are all practicing the tool together, instead of looking at it as a punitive measure, it's just, hey, let's all help each other get through this hard moment, And it's really hard, we have found, to implement a lot of our tools in the moment, but the more we practice them when we're calm, the easier it gets to implement them in the moment. And at the beginning, when we first started this, we actually started it before we even were doing homeschool. It was when one of our daughters was in a traditional school format, and she would just say, I can't use tools. It's very embarrassing. And so we just tried to normalize it and say, everybody needs tools. And in fact, the more you use them, the more respect you will gain from your peers, because they will be excited that you know how to deal with these emotional challenges. And so we just tried to look at it as a positive thing to kind of practice this every day and make it normal. But I figured I would just share some of the tools with you, and then just in case they're helpful to anybody else. But one of them is, like I said, to think about what comes next. And we got that from Charlotte Mason, one of her volumes. And then another one is we choose a focal point. So let's say, like, one of our kids really likes this stuffed animal that he has. And so he will say, I'm going to look at my stuffed animal and it's going to calm me down. And we actually got that, interestingly, from the book Pilgrim's Progress. Do you guys know this book? Okay. In one of the chapters, he's like going along his journey, and he meets up with these three ladies. It's like Charity and Love and Hope or something like that. And they ask him what he does when he hits rough patches in his journey. And he says like 4 different things that he does. But one of them is he thinks about this cloak that someone along the journey had given him, like, some servant of the king had given him this cloak. And it reminded him of God's gifts to him. So when we talk about the focal point, we're really talking about, okay, God has given us this gift, whatever it was. And that inspires us to learn more about his love for us. Like, we can see this gift of his, and we know that he loves us through this gift. And so when I look at this gift, it reminds me of his love, and it inspires me to get back to what we're doing, learning about his love for us. So that's kind of where the focal point like thing came from. But it's just something basically that is pleasant, that helps us be calm, you know. And another one is similar. It's just switching our focus. And this came from another friend, just a friend of mine, who mentioned that it helps them sometimes when they're getting really down to think about somebody else who's having a challenge, and think about how to help them. And there's actually a lot of science behind this. When we do something that helps someone else, it helps us reorient. And I'm a runner. So if any of you guys saw the Boston Marathon, the year, I think it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago, it was raining a lot. It was very cold, rough day to be a runner. And one of the athletes, Shalane Flanagan, who's an Olympian and like amazing, she had to stop and use the bathroom. Well, another athlete in the race, Desiree Linden, she was also an American, and she offered to help Shalane by slowing the pace down of the lead pack. So she said, I'm going to slow the pack down so you can use the bathroom and it's easier for you to get back in it. And she said, because I'm having a rough day and I'm not going to be able to do much today. So anything I can do to help you, I'll do. Well, she did it. Desi helped Shalane. And it actually made Desi Linden run faster. And that recalibrated her brain and where she was feeling emotionally. And she ended up winning the race. So it was this crazy shift in her mentality that happened. And afterwards, all these physiologists and psychologists and exercise psychologists were working through it. Like, how did this happen? And they all brought it back to this moment where she decided to kind of sacrifice what she was doing to help her friend. And it reoriented her brain and changed her race, and she won the thing. So, so it really is this scientific thing that happens in us when we shift our focus to somebody else. So anyway, that's, I guess one of another tool. Another thing we do is just consider the size of the challenge and then try to brainstorm ways to overcome it. So if the challenge really is that the pencil fell on the floor, which to us that can be a big problem sometimes, we just think about, okay, how big is the problem and how big is my response? And is there a different way I can respond? And then we try to practice the different way of responding, like a better way of responding. Um, Okay, then the next one, and this is kind of like in levels, like if it's something simple, we feel like we can use those early levels of tools. And then the next, and this is one that we can do in our chair is deep breathing. So we have all these different types of breathing that we use. We use hot chocolate breathing. So here's our cup of hot chocolate, and we just smell the hot chocolate. It smells so good. And then breathe back out. And we do that a few times. Or candle breathing. Have you guys ever seen this where you breathe up your finger? And then down, release, and then inhale and exhale. And it's really this calming thing that your fingers do too as you go up and down. So that's another one that we use. Some of our sensory kids, one of our sensory kids actually hates that one because she doesn't like the feeling of her finger on her hand. So that's why we have these different ways of doing it. And then another one is box breathing. You guys have probably heard of this. You know, breathe in for a certain number of seconds and then you hold it for that same number of seconds. Then you breathe out for a number of seconds and hold it for that number of seconds. So we'll just practice box breathing. I'll say breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4. And we do that probably 3 times to help us re-engage with whatever our job is at the time. So then the next level up is when we really are pretty frustrated and it's not going to be enough to just sit in our chair and breathe or think, you know. This is when we need a physical release. And so this, the first one is called the drain. And we stand up and we clench our fists. You can do it in your seat. So like, for instance, if they're in a group with peers and they're embarrassed to stand up, you can do it in your seat, but you hold your fists like this and you squeeze them as tight as you can for maybe 10 seconds or 15 seconds. And then you let it all drain out. So you just relax as you drain out. And we try to do that probably 3 times in a row to calm back down. Another one is to just push against a wall. We try to actually make this one more fun because no one likes pushing against a wall. And we try to put our hands, like I'll take a chair and I'll have them push on one side of the chair and I'll push on the other side of the chair. So we're like pushing it kind of at each other and just, you know, and you try to make it a competition. Whoever gets across the line wins, you know. And so that's just like a more fun way of getting that physical release. We also, one of our kids is really fascinated by severe weather. So we do race the angry NATO. And when we're racing the angry NATO, we're really just running in place. So we just stand up and we just run as fast as we can, just in the same spot. And that way we're racing the angry NATO and we can see the swirls in our head and we're getting away from it, you know. Also, one of our kids loves the imaginary punching bag. So we just stand in one place and just punch the air, you know, as hard as we can for 15 seconds or something like that. And then probably our kid's favorite, is anyone familiar with laughter yoga? It is very silly. And Matthew and I, one time, my husband and I, for some anniversary, decided it would be funny to spend the weekend getting certified in laughter yoga. So we went to this place and it was like this kind of retreat thing and they taught us how to do it. And it is so silly, but basically it all boils down to, again, the scientific research that laughter really does change the way we experience emotions and how our brain is operating. And there are ways to force laughter. And when someone laughs a lot, it is, what do you call that when you're spreading it? It's contagious, right? Like other people will start laughing too. So there are all these like laughter exercises you can do that are so ridiculous. But like one of them might be, so you could like laugh like at Christmas, we laugh um, a Christmas Carol or something, but like an easy one, and and you guys can laugh at me if you want because it's silly, but we'll say, okay, we are gonna laugh while we crank this lawnmower. So we like pretend like we got a lawnmower, ha ha ha, ha ha ha, ha ha ha, and then we drive the lawnmower, and it's so silly and they love it and they laugh and laugh and laugh. So that like kind of resets things for us. So then we kind of move into the next level. And have you guys ever read or are you familiar with the book The Whole Brain Child? It's by what is that lady's name? I think it's by a couple of different people, Daniel Siegel and Tina Bryson. They talk about how your upstairs brain and your downstairs brain are typically connected, when you're in a calm frame of mind. But when you get angry, the top comes up and it's called flipping the lid. And so the two parts of the brain are not speaking to each other anymore. So there are exercises that you can do that will get your brain to like come back down. And it has to do, I think, actually, and I may be getting this confused with the right and left brain too, but there are things you can do that like require the two sides of the brain to connect. And so it calms you down. But anyway, so one of them is jumping jacks, and it has to do with like both arms out and your legs are like, you have to, it's a coordinated thing. So if you do jumping jacks, it can kind of bring that lid back down. And same with star jumps. If you're familiar with them, you like go all the way down to your toes and then you jump out like that. It's similar to a jumping jack. But anyway, those are just interesting little exercises that we can do to get the lid back down. And then kind of our last resort is when just nothing else is working, then we'll go to a change of venue. And so we will leave whatever we're doing and take a break from it and come back. And it might be like, perhaps by that point, we just need to walk into another room for a minute and, then we can breathe, whatever, and come back in. But it may be that we need to go outside and take a walk or, whatever. And again, that's not a penalty. It's just, hey, let's just take a breather. And one of my kids particularly is very refreshed when she goes outside, and just nature has a calming, soothing impact for her. So if she goes outside, even for 5 minutes, she can typically come back and re-engage with it, whatever we're doing. And what we found, because the type of day that I like to have is very structured, like I like to know when things are going to happen. And so that is, or used to be, difficult for me. And actually it was difficult for her too, because she felt like she was getting off schedule. And so what we would do is we would say, you know what? Emotional self-regulation is just as important as math. And we've had this happen recently, like within the past week and a half, where we just said, we're switching the math box out today and we're putting emotional self-regulation in, and we're going to practice this self-regulation tool. And so we're still checking the box. It's a different box. We put a different box in there, but the box that we put in was just as important as the box that we took out, So, those are the kinds of things that we have been using in our home. And so I did go ahead and write, some of the books. The Edward Hallowell books that he has written have been helpful. He actually also has some specific exercises you can do, again, with connecting the right and left brain. And interestingly, I will say this, I found out when we started occupational therapy that when you do things that require you to cross the midsection, so riding a bike or even like drawing an X, a big X, like on a board, things like that, those are important activities to learning how to read. So often a kid will learn how to ride a bike and learn how to read at similar times. Like once they learn how to ride a bike, it'll be easier for them to learn to read. because that they have like taught their brains to communicate with each other better from the two sides. So anyway, Edward Hollowell has some exercises in his books that help kids with things like that. And I don't know how to describe them, but you could find them if you were interested. They have to do with like standing on one foot and then standing on the other foot and stuff like that. And then the Whole Brain Child I mentioned, and then Charlotte Mason's volumes are kind of the places that we've pulled our tools from, and various just occupational therapists and physical therapists and things like that. But there's my spiel.
Wow. Joy, thank you so much. I love all this information, and I'm actually taking it for myself. I mean, all of us have these times when we need like to breathe even.
Mhm.
But wow, I wonder if any of you have questions for Joy, just things or comments, things that just rang a bell for you. Yes, Robin.
First, thank you for sharing all that, Joy. That sounds similar to the things that I'm trying to navigate here and
Mhm.
try and like different solutions. So thank you very much. Really appreciate that. I was curious what the tools are that you guys have in the toolbox.
Yeah, they're actually like the tools are actually those specific actions. We call them tools, but they're really the specific actions of
Gotcha.
like racing the angry NATO or doing the drain. So when we say what tool are you going to use today, it's one of those like practices that we're just letting them kind of pull out. And there are different like I've heard of people having them all in picture form and
Mm-hmm.
like draw one
Like
out of
pull 'em out.
or something, right? I just have never gotten my act together enough to make pictures. I've drawn pictures before and we'll like have it up on the board or something. But because some kids are really visual and that helps them with that. So it's definitely an idea. We typically we've been going over them for a couple of years now. And so they pretty much have them in their head at this point. And so we just talk about it and then practice it. But I do think at the beginning, the pictures were helpful. And again, I tend to like paralyze myself with too much, like, oh, I can't do it because I don't have time to find the little picture on the internet. But so that's when I just like took out a pencil and just like literally drew, a tornado, and we used that as racing the angry NATO, things like that.
Gotcha. Okay. I didn't know if it was like the physical and like we're gonna get up and go do this, or that makes sense.
Yeah, kind of all of them are just like part of the tools. And we try to,
Cool.
again, start with kind of the level 1 tools if we can. And
Work up if you have to.
yes, right.
Gotcha.
Wow.
I have a question, Joy.
Okay.
So how do you make it? What are some of the ways you make it not a punishment or penalty? Or yeah, what are some of the things that you've done? And was there an amount of time you felt like it took to get your kids on board with using the tools? Because I know you started, they've been different ages. And so some of your younger kids, that's like all they know is, and your kids are getting, raised in such a mentally health aware environment, which is going to be so good for all of them. That is like normal to talk about those things. But yeah, if you have any advice on that?
Well, the length of time is, I think, like you said, like now it's just part of the day. And that is why we do it literally every single day. And it does take a 10-minute block of time during our daily schedule. And we call it morning meeting, but it is like a solid 10 minutes where we go through that routine. And sometimes longer. Today was actually longer because I felt like we needed to spend a little more time on a couple of the tools, like practicing them, because we have just been having some days where we needed to rely on the tools more heavily. But doing it every single day has made it more acceptable. I will say the challenge comes when when you do meet a challenge and all of a sudden you need to use the tool. So when you said like, how do we not make it punitive? Fortunately and unfortunately, a lot of this comes down to my tone, so it's like, I can either, in fact, when I am angry, my first response is, "Ugh," and then I have to be like, I need to use a tool, and my tool right now is to step out of the room. I need to change the venue, and then come back and hopefully I do choose to use the tool. But when I don't choose to use the tool and I just lose my head, then I typically tell them, hey, you know what? You saw what happened when I didn't use the tool? Like, it really ruined our, 15 minutes of our day. And it would really help if I could use the tool. So that's when I bring in the helping each other. And I think that's why it's not as punitive, is when we literally are saying, let's all practice this together. And we try to do it as an encouragement and a help rather than not. And I think one way to do it, which again, we use with varying levels of success, right? But is saying, do you remember a couple of days ago when you were really sad or you were really angry about whatever it is? And wasn't it helpful when so-and-so helped you? So it's that sort of, okay, let's practice with him today. And that way it just doesn't feel like someone is as singled out. I do think, one of our kids, well, so you asked about time. I do think that sometimes this takes more time than others. So the practice itself takes 10 minutes, but then when you actually run into the challenge, so it depends on how quickly they're able to get back into a rhythm. And so that one day, like a week and a half ago, where we missed like all of math, we literally did miss all of math. So we couldn't do that every day, right? I can't just miss math every single day. And so I have to say, like, if that were happening frequently, I would have to say, we're going to have to do math during IQ time, which we call independent quiet time. But, we're going to do that, later in the day. I really struggle with that. So I try to we hope that that it doesn't get that bad and we're having to do it every day. And back when we first started homeschool, we were having meltdowns literally every single day. And so we just couldn't get through the stuff that we needed to get through. And this is probably not the answer that anybody necessarily wants to hear, but we did turn to medication, which was very helpful for us. So I'm not saying that you necessarily need to do that, but in our family, we kind of did, or we definitely did. Like, and
but for a point of reference, Joy, your children are not like, not everybody knows your kids and knows the journey you've been with and all of the help and therapy and everything else that you've gone through. And there's
yes.
yes. So Joy has her first two are really challenging and have serious challenges they're facing. So it's amazing what she's been able to do with them.
Yeah. So I guess I'm just saying it's not something you need to jump to, but it's okay if you need to use that, because definitely there has been a distinct shift in our home emotionally, because they're definitely more regulated and they're more pleased with being able to be more regulated. So, but I do think it can take us sometimes 15 minutes to get back on track, but before it could take 2 hours to get back on track. So it's better now with just 15 minutes. And I did change something this year going into the year. I built in more time for some of the subjects that I knew we struggled with transitions in. So now rather than having a 20-minute block, we have a 25-minute block. And so we just kind of shifted things that way. So that's a long-winded answer.
That's great.
Yeah, I've talked to several parents who brought their kids home to homeschool when they were having some kind of emotional problems at school. And most of them said it took about 3 months just to help the kids kind of calm down. And I've heard the story over and over again. So if that helps people who are dealing with this kind of transition, it does take time. It's not like you can use your handy toolkit the first day and it all clicks really quickly.
Yes.
Another
like
challenge that
we don't use it successfully every day, but I think just doing the practice every day is helping equip us to do it more successfully as time goes on. So don't think that we just are like, oh, so great at like, okay, just, race your tornado and everything's better. Like we have to choose to use the tool, and that's the hard part. But the more we practice, the more normalized it becomes, and the easier it is to make that choice. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just, one of our challenges is that I have one of 4 that I homeschool that has all of the challenges. And so it's very hard for it not to feel like singled out, punitive. If I know, she needs to go outside and take a break, but it's, not, the other ones never need those. They don't lose it emotionally. Their brains are wired different. Their emotions are different. So that's a challenge that I do because I face of how to help her do it and not feel singled out or embarrassed or just because her brain is different.
Yes, that actually, I feel like that's a really tricky issue because so 2 of our kids are, I guess, what you would consider neurodiverse, and 2 are neurotypical. And so the third born is neurotypical, and she gets very frustrated. Actually, not necessarily, it's not the punitive thing. It's that she feels like they get special treatment because they get to go outside and take a walk. Like, why did they get to go take a walk? Or like at gymnastics, one of them gets to be in a certain place in the gym and the others do not. And so she gets really frustrated about that. Why does he get to do that and I don't? And I don't have a good answer for that. But what I use frequently is this phrase of each of us have different challenges and different capabilities. And so we do treat each of our children differently based on needs and capabilities. And some of their needs are hard, but some of their capabilities are gifts. And we're trying really hard to help everyone see the different gifts, but we're definitely not there yet, but it's what we're attempting to view some of these challenges as gifts, but not as, I don't know. But yeah, Catherine, I think that's just really challenging. And I'm with you in spirit. I think Joyce might have had to cut out. So she had asked me to just continue on if there were more things. But did anyone else have like a particular thing? Or I think also Joyce wanted to know like some resources that you guys have been like leaning on recently, or what has been working for you. Maybe not necessarily along these lines, but just anything that has been helping you lately.
I have a book along these lines that I highly recommend. And I have it here, Raising Worry-Free Girls by Sissy Goff. And the Sissy Goff has another book she wrote with someone else named David Thomas. They're therapists out of Nashville. They have a podcast called the Raising Boys and Girls podcast that has really helpful stuff. But this book has been, I'm underlining so much, but it's really helped me to think about the emotional things probably going on with my daughter. And she has I bought it. There's a workbook that she made for like elementary. The level looks like upper elementary age girls specifically that I got. And I'm kind of hoping to find a way to go through that with my daughter. And it's a lot of this. The stuff you said, Joy, is all in here. The tools, breathing, the body, all of those are some of the things that they teach. And she's just saying, parents, read this. You can try it for yourself, see if you can do it, and then determine if you do need to get further help in some way. But I recommend that book on this topic specifically.
Yeah, I like how you shared, Joy. That was very helpful just to think of it in terms of what tools you have available to control yourself, and that every kid is different and every day is different emotionally, like the weather. A lot of times I will like sing or pray or just like journal myself. Well, what are our options? We could do that. We could worry, like, what's that going to do? Or we could find out more information. But I end up having to do a lot of emotional processing myself still as they all grow up and do theirs. So I think it's nice that you helped me to remember, like, that's how it starts.
I love that you guys sing. That's a great tool. And that's
Yeah, because that kind of gives you a way of going to a new place without going anywhere.
right. Especially because, I mean, the beauty of homeschool, like you can change the order that you do things or whatever, because we usually have some form of music built into the day. So I guess we could just move it, to wherever we are in the day and, oh, let's do our hymn now.
I'm ready.
Right, or our folk song or whatever it is, That's a great-
Right. Yeah. Very true.
So Joy, do I have this thing going? I'm sorry.
I
you
can
guys-
hear you.
Oh, sorry, my phone a little bit. Tablet. I'm sorry. So I just want to say I really do appreciate everything that you shared. Just because I have a 10th grader or an 8th grader or whatever, oh my God, I have an 8th grader and I hope he cannot hear me because because I'm like, Lord, how do I deal with this? I'm serious. You ask, and here it is. You start stating down what the goals. I had to get my paper real quick, and I start writing all this stuff down. I'm just very thankful for you, and thank you so much, seriously, honestly, for sharing your great, testimony and what you do in your home. So I just want to, let you know that. And I'm gonna do some of these things too because it's also even helping me. Okay.
Yes, I wish I could access my tools more frequently. I feel like I'm the one. But the good thing about me having issues is that I can point back to that like continuously. Like whenever they're having a challenge, I can be like, remember yesterday when I did the same thing, So I think that probably helps them feel a little better. But you reminded me when you said 8th and 10th grade, and Catherine just mentioned David Thomas. I remember listening to a podcast by them where he talked about how they have a punching bag in their home for their older boys, and they use it, when there is trouble. So that, I don't know, maybe that would be helpful. And one of my daughters really wants us to get one, and I just don't know where we would put it in our house. But so that's why we do the imaginary one. But maybe maybe he would like that. Let's see. Yeah, I'm curious about, I know, Catherine, there was another book that they wrote too that I feel like you recommended to me. Well,
Are My Kids on Track?
There you go.
Is really good. It's not at all about like academic things. It's looking at like social, spiritual, emotional things, and just a lot of stuff you're applying that, they talk about perspective. They find so many kids lack perspective these days. They're saying like, my anxiety's at 10. They don't know what a 10 for anxiety is. And so kind of helping them with language. But that was one that they did, and they had podcasts that went along with it. And there's one that I realized this week with a son who is really all in his sports. David Thomas has one on emotions and boys coming out this summer. And I need that one like yesterday because, so I've really appreciated them. They know what they're doing, and they share so much for free or by book, podcasts. If you, haven't gone to therapy as a family or your kids, or you're not sure if you want to take them. And there's so much that we can give the kids if we are trained a little bit, and we can practice along with them. And I don't know, maybe help our kids, and maybe they'll probably still need therapy at some point. I don't know.
Well, I think that's such a great point, and something you just said made me think of this, Catherine. So much of therapy is just learning how to self-reflect. And so one thing that we did probably for a straight year every night with one of our kids was we used the color zones. Have you ever heard of like being in the green zone where you're really like ready to go, or blue zone where you're kind of feeling sick or tired. And then there's yellow zone where you're starting to feel tension in your body and you're maybe being a little bit silly or angry or grouchy. And then there's red zone where you're out of control and you're physically doing things that are probably harmful. We talk about like using our angry in a constructive way rather than a destructive way. And so we talk about what we can do with our bodies that's constructive rather than destructive. But we also talk for that year, like every night, we would talk about when they were in the green zone. Like I would just lay down with my daughter and say, when were you in the green zone today? So that means where she's happy, safe, calm, ready to work. And she would tell me, and then I would say, okay, and what about one of the other colors, maybe yellow? And then, so she would tell me, and then I would say, how did you get from yellow to green? And so then it kind of prompted her to think about what tools she may have used even subconsciously. Not necessarily that it would be a tool in our box. Maybe it is, maybe it's not, but it would help her think about it. And so then I think she just became more aware of what zone she was in at what time during the day. Because I do think a lot of times, particularly, I mean, even as adults, especially as adults, I don't know, we'll be doing something and then realize all of a sudden, oh, this is like I'm acting this way because maybe I'm hungry, or maybe I'm sleepy, or maybe I'm, or maybe it's because there's too much going on in my periphery, whatever it is. But if like going through that process with our daughter every night of saying, when were you in the green zone? When were you in the yellow zone? How did you get back? It just helped her think through what she had done. And I feel like that's so much of what therapy is taking time to reflect on what went well, what didn't go well, and what's in our control that we can change to make it more likely to go well, you know? So. And I feel like that's another thing from Sissy Goff and David Thomas. They really are so good. Catherine told me about them, and I try to listen to their podcast, and I haven't read their books, but I need to. So yeah, those are great resources.
Wow. I'm sorry I had to get the door really quickly, but I also, before we leave, I just wanted to ask everyone to share a book that you're thinking of reading or have read recently that is sort of a continuing education as a homeschool mom. So this is just for fun, and Anju has made a list. I'm going to send the connection to everybody, but I'll add these books as well. So does anyone have a book that they're going to read this summer or that they've read recently that they thought was useful? Yes, Robin.
I've got 2 books that I'm reading right now that kind of follow along the lines of this conversation, which I thought about sharing them and I was like, I don't think that's what she means. Maybe this is not the, and then hearing all this, I'm like, this probably fits. Both of my kiddos are highly sensitive children, which after figuring that out led me to realize that I'm a highly sensitive person. I was like, oh, and my husband probably was, but he thinks that the military desensitized him. But so I thought, what can I do to dive a little bit deeper into that research and understand more what's going on in their brains? So I've got The Highly Sensitive Child, and the other one I just got was the Mother and Son Respect Effect. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Love and Respect. It's a husband and wife who are, I think they're psychologists. Their last name starts with an E. I can never remember how to pronounce it. But my husband and I did that when we were first married, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. And then I heard them on the radio a couple of weeks ago, and they mentioned this book and how some comments at conferences to the wife led them to connect these dots and write this book. And my husband and I have had a lot of conversations lately about boys and emotions and how they deal with them. And this was like, I read a couple of things and mentioned it to him. And I was like, does this make sense to you? And he was like, absolutely. And they talk in the book about how, like, if you ask a man the definition of respect, it's quite different than if you ask a woman. And if you ask us what the definition of love is, like, bam, we can tell you. But respect, it's like, what does that look like? And how these moms that he was speaking to, they were like, I don't even know, like, what would that even look like to my child? So I'm just in the very first chapters of that and trying to implement these very tiny pieces of information. And it's making a difference. So I'm really excited about that. And we have some tools that we're using that are like, what can you do to deal with all of all these big feelings like, anger. And my husband was mentioning like we were raised in the 80s and he's like, I never had tools like this or was never allowed to release that anger in some way. Like I had to just shove it deep down inside. Like I couldn't even, yell or stomp or whatever. So we're trying to, and my little boy's six. And I'm like, this is a lot. So anyways, those are my two that are really helping me right now that I'm really excited about. And I'm happy to share those titles if you guys haven't seen those yet.
And I'll look them up on Amazon and put them on Anju's list too. I'll make sure to send that to y'all, and Joy's toolbox as well. All right, any other books that y'all are reading?
I just made like a pile of books.
Ooh.
Am I talking? I don't know.
Yes.
This is a book on like how to memorize things. I'm going to scan all these, how to read a book,
Oh, okay.
rule book for arguments.
Ooh,
To learn how to write. Very therapeutic. Wait, I have the same copy. We're going to draw. Yay.
basic drawing.
This is very inspirational to get a fat stack of books laying down the rails. This is fun.
Yeah.
And
I think
composing.
it's on
we're gonna
Anju's
study,
list
like,
already. Oh,
modern
composers.
composers next year.
Oh, wow. Yeah, scan
So-
those in so I can add them to the list.
Okay.
Yes. And Nicole has high school students, as you can tell. So some of hers are rather
Right.
sophisticated.
They have to like
But
get outside
Yeah.
their heads and start learning.
that's really good. Yes. Yes. All right. Anyone else on your summer
I'll
reading
go.
list? Yes.
I'll go. I didn't prepare a pile. These are just what's next to me on my bedside table. So it doesn't really apply to homeschool specifically. But I have On the Spectrum. It's about autism, faith, and the gifts of neurodiversity. I don't know if I can,
Wow.
let me see if I can do this right. Oh, it's backwards. That wouldn't help you. Looking for Lovely by Annie Downs is really good. Then Raising Real Men by Hal and Melanie Young. Also No Longer Little by Hal and Melanie Young. So
Oh,
those are just
wow.
on my bedside table right now. So,
Wow.
but the Youngs especially have been very valuable. So I recommend them for homeschooling.
Thank you, Amy. That is
Mm-hmm.
wonderful. Wow. I'm inspired.
Wow. You guys got the good stuff. I don't have all the good stuff. I need you guys got. But this is the one we was gonna do. I don't know if you can see that. It's called The History of Freedom. It doesn't go with that, but I wanted to teach my kids about freedom and so forth and on, and so they won't have to. It's a lot of things going on in the world, and I don't want them. I don't know how.
And you have high school students too, right?
Yes.
Yes. So
Yeah.
you're getting to the more complex issues.
Yes.
That's right. Oh, wow.
Good stuff. I need to get some of y'all books. Y'all gotta do those on the. I have to look at them seriously.
Oh,
Hey, there's the plug for making sure you filled out your the survey, because you get a $25 gift card. You can go buy books on
right.
Amazon.
yes. If you haven't filled out your survey yet, you've got to do that. And then you'll get a book. You can, yes, have your
Okay.
summer reading ready. All right. That's great. Anyone else have books that you want to share?
Catherine told me about Atomic Habits and I loved it. I finished that one a couple weeks ago. It was so helpful and he was so good at making sure that it didn't feel like overwhelming. It's just like one little step at a time. And so now when we create our goals, we do monthly goals with the kids and we make them habit-based goals that are attached to like some identity, like for Vienna, I want to be a creative person. I want space to create. So I'm going to spend 10 minutes every day cleaning my room so that I have space the next day to create. So then we put it on the calendar, like this is the time of day that I'm going to clean, so it really helped us like formalize how we did, kind of individual monthly goals. So So I really,
Wow. Can you tell me the name of that book again about habits?
it's called Atomic Habits. Catherine, do you remember
Atomic.
the author? I forget his name.
Okay. I'll find it on Amazon. I just want to add them all to the list.
Yeah, these are great books.
That one's
Yes.
James Clear.
And what is it?
James Clear.
James Clear? Okay, thank you. All right. Excellent. And Catherine, did you have a book about stress-free girls?
I shared it while you were
Oh,
off.
well,
but
okay.
It's called Raising Worry-Free Girls.
Oh, Raising Worry-Free Girls.
And
Okay.
the other one that these authors wrote is Are My Kids on Track, is also really good. Yeah, talks about emotional, like all of the we as moms and homeschoolers, we're not just looking at their, grade level test scores, the whole person that we're trying to raise.
That is really good. And I'm so glad that we can share with each other, because sometimes when you're doing this by yourself, you think, am I the only one that's dealing with this? So anyway, this is such an encouragement. And I'm going to share it with our larger Homeschool Inspire group, which has grown to about 85 people. So it's really exciting. And I'm also going to share Joy's handout and a book list, or a link to a book list that I made for children's reading in the old days. So these are older books, but they might just spark an idea of a book one of your children might like to read too. So I will share all those things, and I hope you all have a wonderful summer. Remember to contact your mentor if you just want to check in or have somebody to talk to. Okay.
Thanks,
So-
Joy.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you
all.
so
much, Joyce.
Have a wonderful day.
Enjoy.
Bye.